Welcome to today's episode. Today I have Pat Lay, who has worked for 32 years for Shamrock International, third generation family, and I can't wait for you to listen. How's it?
Oh, he's gonna film the track. Okay, perfect. Like we're having a discussion.
Just like we're having a discussion.
I need a plumber, by the way. I need to talk to you about that.
Have you ever, what's wrong?
I just got some little things I need fixed at our house.
You're in Scott Carter's old house,
I
right?
am. Spit to it from here. Yeah.
It's like 6 minutes.
Yeah,
Something
no,
like
it's like
that.
2.
That's the neatest house. The
You
way
can,
it's
yeah, you can spit to it from here.
it's like a C.
It is.
It's
Great
it's
house.
I wonder who originally built that.
I can tell you that whole
Who?
story. Dr. Bob Allen, 1978. He was first cardiologist in Cleveland.
Bob Allen.
Bob Allen.
I wonder who built it. Maybe Bob Kaler?
No, Ed Allen built it.
Ed Allen. So it's built well.
It's a fortress. Yeah.
I
pretty good.
remodeled it 3 times.
All trusses upstairs. Yeah, pretty
I
good.
remodeled it 3 times for Scott.
Yeah, good house. Great house.
Now, your wife, you were telling me before she's Stan Calfe's daughter. I had absolutely no idea.
That's exactly who she is.
I knew him really well. He was a
great man.
He was a great man. And, when you dig wells, they can't tell you how much it's going to cost because they don't know how deep or how much water they're going to get or what the pressure is. So you're strictly just subject to what they tell you because you can't know.
Don't know what they're going to hit. I mean, they have an idea about whether or not they're doing bedrock or things like that, but
or how much casing.
Casing. But it's a nasty art.
And people,
Lost art, actually.
It really is. And he used to witch them.
Yeah.
He'd witch them and tell me about where. But funny thing is, he dug 4 or 5 for me. And, of course, I was doing it for customers. And we had this common thing. He'd get started, and I'd go get the newspaper. And we'd sit and read the newspaper together, like off and on for 2 or 3 days till he got the water.
Did he have a crew with him that
It was usually, by then, it was just him waiting.
Yeah, wait for the machine to hit.
So we'd sit in the chair, and I'd get the newspaper, and we'd read the newspaper.
Well, Melody told me a lot of stories. Melody and I met in October of 2013, and he passed away in August of 2013, just a couple months prior to. And I never got to meet him, which is my loss, of course. He's a great guy. But she told me a lot of stories. He had a hard time saying no.
He couldn't.
He would go and people call him at 10 o'clock at night. He'd go out and take care of folks and
fix a pump,
get people's water back on. I mean, without water, you're in trouble. I mean, you can go for a while, but not too long.
Yeah, and
we're spoiled without.
Without water, I don't know how people make it. They had to go to the creek and get it with buckets or something.
Well, either the creek or the crick.
Or dig it with a shovel.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, it's just.
I guess that's why they lived close to springs.
They did, and they knew how to find them. People built houses and home places and neighborhoods and all that kind of stuff.
Well, that just wouldn't work today, would it?
No, we're spoiled, aren't we?
Now, Stan's wife, she stayed with him quite a bit.
She did.
They would eat at Cameron's a lot.
They would.
And Waffle House.
Yeah. Now, Melody's mom, Gloria, and Stan split years ago, and they both remarried.
Well, I'm thinking of his second
wife. Yeah. That's right. But now Melody's mom lives out Mouse Creek. She's still here in town. She lives out pretty good poke out there. She lives past, where Toby's ex-wife lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's a couple Christian Drive, couple neighborhoods past that, all the way down there. But she's
they
doing
just
good.
Developed that. No, it's up on the right.
It is up on the right.
Yep. Bill Odom
developed
that.
But she still lives out there, Melody's mom. Matter of fact, Melody's out there visiting with her right now.
I developed Horse Creek Farms. It's just beside me.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
That's a good one.
That was a good one.
Real good.
We finished about 15 minutes before the economy went bad.
Okay.
Literally, it was just a few minutes, another month, and we'd have had
So you sold it out and you got out.
right. I mean, just right before, without any problems. My luck.
Somebody say that's luck, but
Yeah.
luck's where preparation and opportunity collide. Last time I checked.
You know, I was watching. I was watching. You ever watch these old shows, sitcoms and stuff?
Oh yeah.
I was watching My Three Sons. Did you? Are you too young for My Three Sons?
No, I remember My Three Sons.
You know, I noticed something. I've been watching it here lately, and something they always say on that show that I didn't pick up on when I was growing up. But he says, and you fill in the blank, whatever you want, is only a series of incremental adjustments. Success is just a series of incremental adjustments, or winning is just a series of incremental adjustments, whatever it is. And I guess that's true. Anything is just simply incremental adjustments.
Yeah, it is. I look at what I do for a living and have for a long time. Like I said, I had the privilege for working for a friend of mine, like I mentioned, for a few years. But you know, I've been a salesman my entire career after graduating from University of Tennessee, and I've had to make incremental adjustments on how I approach people over those years. You know, based on customers changing. You know, our biggest customer is Whirlpool. Not just this facility. I'm responsible for this plant here in Cleveland, but we sell to all of them in North America. And I've watched how we've had to pivot and change and make those incremental adjustments to stay successful and stay profitable. That's you could teach a whole class in college and high school on that, and you'd probably be more valuable than anything else you could teach
on how to adjust.
How to adjust. Making success is just a series of incremental adjustments. I may write that down on my notebook paper and put it in my car. That's rich.
It is.
That's
and
rich.
I didn't realize that till I've started watching it lately, and I noticed they capitalize on that statement. I didn't even pick up on it.
We can learn a lot from that, can't we?
Yeah, some of those old shows, they were more in depth, and things haven't really changed. We think they've changed, but the basics hasn't changed.
As long as human beings are involved, they're not going to.
But
because it's all people.
But customers are different.
Customers are different. Another thing I have learned over my career, and you've probably learned this, you got customers, you got problems. You don't have any customers, you got real problems.
Right.
But they've all changed. And, you know, I'll be 56 in a couple months, and I deal with people in their mid to late 20s now that are a different breed. They're educated different, they think different. So I've had to morph. I don't sell, I don't discuss, I don't communicate like I used to with my customers. I have to use more technology.
It's hard.
I'd rather see them in person, but some of them they want me to email them or text them or get on Microsoft Teams or whatever, you know. So you just got to change if you want to stay successful.
Go to meeting.
Zoom. All that stuff.
I don't know what are we handicapped in the. I mean, I can do it, but you just don't get a feeling of the aura of the situation without being there. It's like you can't see the side of their face or something.
No, you don't pick up on I mean, you can pick up on a little bit of the nonverbal, but you can't see body language, and you can't tell a whole lot. When I need to get something done, I see somebody in person.
It doesn't matter if it's a 5-hour drive; it'll save you time.
Tuesday, I'm taking one to Charleston, South Carolina, to pick my boss up at the airport, and we're going to see a customer right outside Charleston. That's a 6-hour drive, but this is one of these that's got to be an in-person job.
You know, I've been doing this project, and it calls for this real expensive iron doors. There's probably $180,000 worth of iron doors. And I've been emailing the guy and texting him and stuff. And I'm going down there Wednesday to have lunch with him. No reason, just to see a face and let him know I can come down there if I need to. And I believe we'll get more done in an hour and a half than I will all of these emails back. You know, and you also put kind of I think there's a more of an obligation on the other side when we've sat and talked about it rather than me emailing you.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Emailing, I mean, you can. It is what it is, but there's sometimes when you just can't, and maybe other people can, but I can't. Sometimes there's so much to unpack. You could write a book if you do an email, but you and I can sit down and in 5 to 10 minutes get more done than you can in a whole day, because it's just more productive.
I think text messages are kind of for directions and times, and emails are more for stored information that might need to be transferred. But any type of decisions or planning really needs to be in person. I think that.
Yeah, email's good for document transfer,
Yeah.
where you can scan stuff and get a copy of a contract and quote. I do quote all my quotes via email. Our company does through technology, web-based stuff, and I've never issued an apology via email. I've always done those in person, and I've had to do plenty of those. But trust me, in my career, but those are. I don't know. I think when you make it personal, email's a great tool, text a great tool, but when you need to make something personal, you need to go see somebody. I've always
even
found
if it is a little distance.
Even if it
Phone
requires.
call is the next best thing, I guess.
Yeah, I remember one of the biggest, other than the appliance industry and the automotive industry, are our two biggest industries that we sell to. You can go over here to Whirlpool and see.
What do you sell?
Fasteners, fastening components, anything. You can put it in a shoebox. I can sell it. It basically.
Cotter pins.
Cotter pins. Our company motto is "We help you build great things," which is a pretty good one. Fasteners. But it's in extremely amount of high volume stuff. Whirlpool, I'll use them as an example. They have one part over here that they use just on all 11, 12 production lines. They have a part over there that they use about 96 million pieces a year. Now, half of them they drop on the floor.
Sure.
Because they're have their tack time and they're in a hurry and they slip off the gun and all that. But they use a tremendous amount of volume of that particular part, because I think there's maybe 117 of those, just that one part that holds those ovens together, double wall ovens and cooktops and all the stuff that they make over here. But we everything we sell is custom tooled, custom designed parts to go to specialized industries and specialized joints and clips and all kinds of things. Just we sell tape and foam and just all kinds of stuff like that. So
you manufacture it? Or
we do. We're primarily a distributor, but we consider ourselves a hybrid manufacturer. We own plants and we have partners overseas and here in the States as well that make our parts for us. But we put them in a box and ship it in. But last year we sold over the piece count of everything we sold as a company was about 3 billion pieces, which is a lot. But when you're in that manufacturing environment, if you look at an automobile, you start going out here and look at your car, there's nuts and bolts everywhere. They hold that thing together, in your engine compartment, behind your door panels, in your headliner, underneath the wheel well. If you've ever worked on an appliance, there's screws you have to take out everywhere. And
stuff they can't run to Ace and get.
No.
They wouldn't have enough of them. And they wouldn't have that oddity.
It would never work now because it's all custom designed for that particular company.
And you can't these manufacturers cannot hold the line up.
No, that's right. And it's all toleranced as well. It has to be it's all very intricate. If it's too long or too short or doesn't work, they'll send people home over here, and we never want that. That'd be bad.
Is it any pressure?
It can be. I've got a lot of stories about driving parts to customers in the middle of the night when they've lost stuff, and flying stuff on an airplane and buying a duffel bag and putting 4 or 5 boxes of parts inside a duffel bag as a carry-on. I've got all kinds of stories about stuff like that and some of it's, self-inflicted wounds by us not being able to deliver, and some of it's customers, they lose parts.
Or
They're just human.
Miscommunication.
Miscommunication, forget to order it. Even though we're so automated, it still happens. We do air freights to somebody every day, every week, overnight parts.
And they're located out of Illinois?
Chicago, outside, about near O'Hare Airport.
Mm-hmm.
Not a big company, privately held, and really good, solid family that owns that company. About $100 million company. Not huge, but really good. Been good to me. And like I said, I had the privilege of working for a friend of mine here in town named Ralph Petty, and he was great to me for years. I worked in did some in a marketing environment with him, and that was a great professional experience for me. It actually helped me tremendously in the second phase of working full time for Shamrock International, because I've been back in my current role about I won't say maybe 13 years now, which is the regional vice president of sales for the southeast part of the United States, which is big territory.
Yeah. And
there's a lot of a lot of car factories in the south, and a lot of appliances. You wouldn't believe all the appliance industries in the south. Now, think about this. You got Whirlpool here in Cleveland. You got Electrolux is in Springfield, Tennessee. Most people don't know that, where they make all Electrolux stoves. Mm-hmm. And you got GE, which is Louisville, Kentucky, and they got a plant in Alabama, got a plant in South Carolina. Electrolux also has a dishwasher plant in North Carolina. That's my responsibility. You got Viking Range, which is in Greenwood, Mississippi. Now that's a hard place to get to. But you've got a lot of, in my territory, the appliance industry and the automotive industry's got a big footprint. So,
and those are potential customers.
A lot of them are existing customers, and a lot of them are potential customers. Yeah, I'm throwing seed all the time. I'm always wanting to try to get a few more good customers, as long as the fit's there. You can't cut a deal to everybody.
No,
you know that.
No,
it's got to.
Sometimes you got to let them have the other guy for a while.
Sometimes you got to let them have the other guy. I've had to fire customers before because they didn't live up to their commitment, and that's hard to do.
Yeah.
But I learned a no from somebody's closer to a yes from somebody else, which is kind of what I've always lived by in sales.
I hate a slow no. Don't you?
Yeah.
Just go ahead and say it. Let's get on to something else.
Yeah, because I've got somebody else right down the road I can go talk to.
Yeah.
That's fun. It's fun. But I've been very blessed. I'll just tell you, I've had an unbelievable career, and professionally I've been able to have a lot of people influence me in such a positive way since I graduated from college at UT Knoxville.
What led you to that one job? Did you apply, or they just have it?
I got lucky.
I mean, did you run into somebody?
I did. I was working at First Citizens Bank, and because I thought I wanted to be in the banking business, and I learned pretty quick after I was a teller, and I learned pretty quick when my drawer didn't balance.
Yeah. That
I wasn't cut out for that. And matter of fact, I worked with Mike Jenny, Judge Jenny, for a while. He was a teller.
He was about your age.
He's my age. We graduated from high school together, and there was a couple of times where my drawer didn't balance, and I was panicking because Ken Rayburn, who owned First Citizens Bank at the time, was president. He would come around and won't be sure how our tellers were doing, and I didn't balance, so I was sweating bullets.
He's a nice guy.
He was, and he extended me a lot of grace, but after I messed up, I knew I wasn't in the banking business. So a friend of mine was in purchasing at Magic Chef at the time. And Shamrock company I work for now was a supplier to Magic Chef. Magic Chef was one of their biggest customers and had been since 1980. So I met this guy, and his name was Tom Melton. I don't know if you know Tom, a native Cleveland guy. And he said, hey, Shamrock is looking to open a warehouse here in Cleveland, and they're looking for somebody to run the warehouse. And they're also looking for somebody to kind of help with account management. And you need to apply for the job. So I filled out a resume to the best of my ability, and it got in the hands of them up in Chicago. And the owner, a guy named Sam Wachelis, a Polish fella. He called me up, and of course, this is pre-cell phone. This is when you call on the landline. He said, I got your resume, and I think you're a good fit for the job. Everybody knows you over there. A lot of people know you, Matt. They know who you are, know your family, know your dad, know your granddad, all that kind of stuff. And he said, I'm going to send you a plane ticket. You'll have to drive to Nashville and get on Southwest Airlines, and you'll have to fly up here, and I'll pick you up at the airport. So, sure enough, he picked me up, and he walked faster through that airport than anybody I've ever seen in my life. He had on these leather shoes and this slick little suit.
Yeah.
And he put me and he said, ever been to Chicago? I said, I've never been out of the state of Tennessee except one time. So I went over to Shamrock and we talked. Now this is in July of 1991. Seems like a long time ago, but that's 32 years ago. Yeah. Almost 32. And by the time we went to lunch, I'll never forget, we went to a place called Gabby's, and I had a Reuben sandwich, which was delicious. Mm-hmm. And at lunch, he said, "You're my guy. When can you start?" And I said, "How about October 1st?" He said, "You need to move up here, and you need to live here for a year so I can teach you the business. And after a year, you move back to Tennessee and open a warehouse." So that's how it went down.
How'd you like living in Chicago?
I was miserable. I felt like a milk bucket under a bull. I was out of place. I mean, it's cold, and I'd never lived anywhere that cold. And, I went up there, and here's what's funny thing. I thought they were going to rent me an apartment. Most of the time when you go to work for somebody, they rent you an apartment or whatever, and they've got this and that. Well, I get up there, and Sam tells me, he said, "You're going to be living in a little city called Downers Grove, Illinois, and you're going to be living with my mother-in-law." And I said, "I am." And he said, "Yeah, this is my wife's mother, and she's retired, and her name is Dorothy Hanson, and she got a really nice flat." That's what they call flat.
Yeah.
And this was about a 1,700 or 1,800 square foot, really nice apartment. Very nice. 3-bedroom, big kitchen, big den. So I lived with her for a whole year, and she was in her mid-70s at the time. She's since passed, but she took care of me like I was her own child. She cooked for me every day. She wanted to know what she bought Little Debbie's for me at the grocery store, which, that's never a bad thing. Of course, I can't eat those anymore. But she was good to me. So I lived with the owner's mother-in-law for the whole time I was there.
This is after eating lunch with the guy?
This is after eating lunch.
Well, he was a quick thinker, wasn't he?
I guess he thought I could do the job.
Yeah.
And gave me my first real opportunity to build a career. Because I knew I wasn't cut out for the banking business. I didn't do a good job. It wasn't, you can't put a square peg in a round hole. Wasn't my deal.
Some people just aren't into numbers like that.
They're not. I'm good with numbers, but not. It just wasn't. It wasn't what I was meant to do. I meant to be out in front of people doing stuff. Well, I went up there, moved up there, and I started out packing parts packing boxes. And I asked him, I said, "Well, how are you going to train me to learn this product? Because I've got to learn the product if I'm going to sell it, and I need to be familiar with it." If back then it was Magic Chef. Of course, Magic Chef got bought out by Maytag, then Maytag got bought by Whirlpool. And they said, "Now listen, you got to learn everything we sell. You got to know everything about it technical." I said, "Well, how am I going to do that?" "You're going to pack all these parts." And they gave me this book. It was about that thick, D. It was called the IFI, and it's called the Industrial Fastener Institute. And it's got every kind of screw, nut, and bolt in there that's in the world, and it's got all the technical data about each one. A machine screw, sheet metal screws, nuts, washers, all that stuff. You've seen all this. Cotter pins, you mentioned. Yeah. So I studied that book. That's all I did.
Almost like a Chilton's Manual for Parts or something.
Exactly right. It's the Fastener Bible.
Yeah, Fastener Bible. And
Sam told me, "You need to read this thing from cover to cover. I want you to read the preface and the index and everything. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over that line, that pack line, and I'm gonna, whatever you're packing, I'm gonna pick it up. I'm gonna show it to you, and I want you to tell me what it is. You need to know the difference. Now, you may not know the size or the length, but I need you to know whether it's got a Phillips drive or a star drive or a Torx drive or a slot. I need you to know if it's a machine screw or a sheet metal screw, fine thread, coarse thread, what the material is, whether it's got zinc or nickel or black plating. You need to know everything. So I did that, and sure enough, he'd come out there, because we didn't pack the same thing all day, every day. They would switch over, always different. And sure enough, that's what he did. And they took tests, and then I worked in the quality lab where I would have to do the measurements with tools and instruments and such. Micrometers, spec all that. And he did the same thing. What are you working on today? So I'm actually, as strange as it sounds, I'm an expert at that. I'm an expert at making recommendations of what people need in a joint, what works, what doesn't work, what they can expect, most economical thing. And I got all that training by going through that exercise, and it was very informal, but it was perfect because I knew about the product. And then I worked on the desk after I was managing customers, and I worked in shipping for a while, and I worked in manufacturing, watched stuff being made. So I did that for a whole year, and then they came back here and turned me loose. And I was scared to death. Petrified would be a word I would use.
And that's been 32 years.
1991, came back to Cleveland in 1992. Of course, I grew up here.
Yeah.
So I got the privilege to come back here. I lived at home with my mom and dad in the basement, and they charged me rent, which made me mad.
Because you'd been living with the mother.
Exactly. I didn't have to pay a dime.
Yeah.
My parents charged me rent. They did feed me. Then they gave me the money that I paid them for my first honeymoon. They saved it for me, which I thought was pretty cool.
At least, yeah.
That's right. Yep. So that's the story of Shamrock.
Now, let me ask you this. Your wife is a cow, just back to the Calfies. Stan, how's he related to Frank Calfee?
They're first cousins. Stan and Frank are first cousins.
Wonder which parent was it that was the connection?
So, you had Clyde, who started Clyde Calfee and Sons well drilling.
Yeah.
And Clyde had several boys, one of which was Stan.
Yeah.
And my wife, Melody, that Stan was her father. So Clyde had brothers as well, and several of them. And one of Clyde's brothers is Frank's dad.
I see.
So that's the connection. So like Greg, the builder, Eric, who's a doctor in Dalton, Georgia, who married Don Irvin's daughter, Jill.
Yeah, I remember. I know.
You got Mike Calfee and Laura, who's married to Al Shoemaker, here in Cleveland.
Yeah.
My wife and they're all cousins. But they're a lot of them, the Calfees, they're like brothers and sisters, even though they're cousins. They're very, very tight knit family. But I couldn't.
Then you got Leroy.
Then you got Leroy, who's a hot mess, but I love Leroy. Yeah. But you got the best pork chop biscuit in town out there.
Oh, I know it. Yeah, I had. Yeah, we showed his picture on there. On one episode.
But now, they're great because, like I said, even though they're first cousins and second cousins, they're really more like brothers and sisters. That's just such a tight knit family. Great play.
Well, didn't Frank sell for Magic Chef?
He sold for Brown.
Oh, I had that.
He worked for Brown for years.
Okay.
And Brown's also one of my customers. I've been selling parts to Brown.
Magic Chef.
No, he worked for Brown for years and years and actually retired from there.
I guess everybody around here at some point worked in the stove industry.
A lot of people did, and it's one of the things that one of the many things that Bradley County is known for, because you had Brown stove, you had Hardwick stove, and then Hardwick Magic Chef.
Dixie Foundry.
Yes, yes. And then see, Magic Chef bought Hardwick, but they continued to make that chassis, if you will. They made that product.
Yeah.
Even though they owned it, but they still had the Hardwick name, the Hardwick placard. And Hardwick Stove Company stayed around long after it was not owned by Hardwick Stove. It was owned by Magic Chef. And then eventually they migrated, and everything was Magic Chef. Eventually.
Do you have to have a stove? I know we got microwaves, but you got to have a stove too, don't you?
You got to have a stove. You really do. Unless you want to cook over open fire.
Yeah.
Or you grill. But, they make, back in the day, Magic Chef made just your freestanding 4 legs, 4 sides,
yeah, electric
stove. And Brown did the same thing. Now, Brown made stoves for the RV industry. And also they still make a real small stove for your government housing.
Yeah, they make sort of the specialty
small
stuff.
But Magic Chef for years just made those stoves. They made thousands of them a day. And then Maytag, of course, bought them out, and they started making cooktops over here, like you put in an island. Mm-hmm. Then they started making double wall ovens, which you put in your cabinetry.
That was a big thing.
That was a big thing early on, yeah. And
Mid-70s.
And now over here in Cleveland, they make all that. It's Whirlpool now, of course, but they also make your high-end KitchenAid and Genair. They make a product over here that's about a $10,000 or $12,000 retail stove that they make over here, but they make all the double wall ovens. They make 5,500 to 5,600 stoves a day over here at this plant. Most people don't realize how big of a deal it is.
I would have never guessed that.
Lots of them.
I'd have never guessed that.
Yeah. And they employ 1,700 people. And they reinvested in Bradley County, which was a big deal. They could have packed that thing up, moved it to Mexico, or
I bet we were teetering on whether or not they were coming and going, and we didn't even know it, did we? Because that would have been a big hurt.
It would have been a huge hurt. And but leadership at Whirlpool up in Benton Harbor invested in Bradley County because it had good workforce here, knowledgeable people. To your point earlier about a lot of these guys that were engineers and design guys that worked for Magic Chef, that were Maytag guys that moved over to be Whirlpool guys. And you still got a lot of those people love Cleveland so much they retired here and they stayed here. I mean, I've got a lot of friends that I've known over the years that just retired and stayed, and the fact that and of course Bradley County and the state of Tennessee sweetened the pot, of course, for them to stay. Mm-hmm. But it's been a big deal, and I hope they stay for generations to come because it's a good employer and a great customer. Great customer. I love going over there and know other people. I get to go over there a lot.
I've been by there, but I can't get in because it's almost like locked up like a fortress now if you don't work there.
If you ever get a chance, to go through there, you should. And also the Volkswagen plant. If you've never been through the Volkswagen plant. Everybody needs to do that.
Do you think we'll get another big industry here we got Valker. I don't know how many it employs, do you?
Several hundred. I don't know the exact head count. I think the city of Cleveland and the chamber and all that, I think they're pushing. Southeast Tennessee corridor is a big, great place to live and raise families still. Mm-hmm. It's got rail, it's got rail, and it's got river, and it's got I-75. So you got all three of those things that make it very attractive for industry, manufacturing. I think there'll be some more come in here. I do. We've got Exit 20 down here that the city has grandiose plans for. Mm-hmm. They want more employers. They
don't have the river up there, though.
They don't have the river up there. The river's, the Hiawatha's on the north end.
Exit 33, I guess you'd call it.
Yep. There's another company coming up here to the Charleston exit, Samson Controls, which they have not started construction on that yet. But I do think we're going to see some growth. About
where would they be?
They're right by the GE Distribution Center, right
to the right or to the left.
If you're facing it to the right, in between there and Wright Brothers. But there's room for expansion in Bradley County. And
what does that company do?
I think they make some specialized controls. I'm not real sure for what industry, but
not many employees.
Probably a few hundred, but not anything major like thousands. Yeah. But I do see the day when we might get something else like that.
Of course, you figure a place like that, if they employ 200, you get 8 more of them. You got the same as as Whirlpool.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
it's every little bit helps, I guess.
That's
and
right.
that may be a good thing, not to be just so subject to just one industry.
Yeah, we need some more automotive suppliers to come in here. Volkswagen thought that they would have more that would come in, and a lot of them haven't done that.
Wonder why? This doing more shipping.
I don't know if they couldn't get the deal they wanted. It didn't make sense to come in and build a plant. Cost to build a plant. You got a lot of downward pressure to reduce cost in that industry from the OEM itself. You had a few come in. We've got one in Cleveland down here that supplies the Volkswagen at Exit 20. It's kind of tucked back in.
It's sort of a new one, right?
Yeah, it's kind of tucked back in back there. And there's a few here in Cleveland that do a few things. You've got down at Appliance Park down there at Volkswagen, you've got several, some of which are my customers. You've got Gestamp down there, which is huge, which is employees. And there's a few. There's a Chinese company down there that does the headliner and like the whole dashboard of what they make at Volkswagen. But not as many as I think they've hoped. There was a lot of jobs promised and there was a lot of jobs delivered, but I think that the goal was a bit lofty.
It sounds like it might have been a little played up, maybe.
A little bit.
Or maybe it just hadn't happened yet.
A little bit. The bad press on the Passat hurt it.
That hurt.
You remember
in the
when
beginning,
that went down?
That was like a year after they opened or something.
That's right.
Then the bad economy.
Then
COVID.
Yes.
So you take all of those three.
Yeah, and the whole emissions thing.
Yeah.
With the Passat.
Yeah.
That was bad. That was bad. I made 182,000 of those cars a year. I think the second year after the plant opened down here. And by the time all that bad press hit and all that, they were only making about a third of that. Then they brought the SUV in, of course.
Thank goodness, right?
They had to find something to backfill that, or they would have, Of course, they make everything else in Mexico. They make the Bug in Mexico, the Tiguan, the Jetta. They make all those cars down there.
I guess labor's cheaper there.
Labor's cheaper there, yeah. But they still make this SUV up here is fantastic, and of course they're moving electric. But they still make a few Passats, but they're primarily making that SUV down there now. But still a great thing for Southeast Tennessee. There's a lot of Cleveland people that work down there. A lot of Cleveland people.
Do you remember back in... Now, let me ask you this. Your dad is who?
My dad's Ken Lay.
Ken. I know Ken.
Ken,
yeah.
Yes.
And I tell you where I met Ken was at Farmland Corners when he was helping Joe Rogers
Jr.
develop all that.
That's right.
Yeah, he was. That's his thing.
It is. He obviously went to work for. He went to UT as well. Mm-hmm. Graduated in the early 60s or mid 60s, I guess, 64, 65, maybe 63.
Let me tell you about Capstar Bank. They're located in Nashville, Hendersonville, Gallatin, Athens, Madisonville, Sweetwater, Etowah, and in Cleveland at 950 25th Street and 3855 North Ocoee Street. I've used them. I like them. Give them a try. They're no problem. So Ken was a graduate of UTC?
UT Knoxville.
UT Knoxville.
Yeah.
In the mid-60s?
Early 63, 4, somewhere in there.
So you weren't born, obviously.
No, I was born in 67. But also, my dad has two other brothers.
Yeah.
Ed Lay.
Ed, I know Ed.
And Howard.
I don't know Howard. I know Ed and Ken.
Yeah, Ed and Ken and Howard were all brothers. And they all went to UT.
Who was the oldest?
Ed's the oldest, and then Howard, and then my dad's the baby of the family. But they all went to UT, and but they all came back to take over and run Lay and Company, Lay's Five and Dime. Now, when they all graduated.
When did Lay's Five and Dime start?
I had to do a little research on this, and I did it because I wanted to, just for my own personal knowledge, because I actually had it all wrong. So my granddad, whose name was D.B. Lay, okay, he and his brother started laying company in 1925.
1925. In Cleveland, Tennessee.
No, they in Athens, Tennessee.
Athens. They were originally from Athens.
They were, and they bought
Right before the Depression.
they bought a little retail store up there in 1925.
Because they were from Athens, I guess.
My granddad's brother was living in Athens, and so DB was living in Athens because my grandmother Mildred was from Athens. She was a Grayson. Her last name was Grayson, and she was in Athens. So DB was there.
Yeah.
And they bought this little retail store, and they paid $500 for it.
Downtown Athens, I assume.
Right by Tennessee Wesleyan College, and they paid $500 for it. A lot of money back then. They bought everything in there, and the guy that sold it to them said, "Well, I need to clean out the cash register." And my granddad said, "No, you're not going to do that because we bought everything in here." Well, they got in the cash register, and guess how much money was in the cash register? $500.
Is that right?
That's exactly how it went down. So they got that store for nothing, and they started laying company right there, and then they opened a store in Etowah.
So it was already a hardware store.
It was already a 5 and dime retail store where they sell clothes and candy and a little bit of hardware, and
above just one step above your what do you call it?
Dollar General.
Yeah, maybe even lower than that, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it wasn't much. I mean,
a step above Sam Drucker's store.
Yeah,
the
the products back then, they weren't near as much available back then as there is now. Everything.
Yeah.
And of course, they bought everything in the U.S. and so they didn't import. So anyway, they bought this store. Then they ran that store. Then they opened one in Etowah. And they had a Lay's store in Athens and a Lay's store in Etowah. And they ran that till 1934. And in 1934, they closed Athens and closed Etowah and opened a store in Cleveland and opened a store in Dayton, Tennessee.
Wonder why they closed those two.
Because Cleveland and Dayton were both growing faster.
And
population-wise,
Etowah was kind of dying at the time,
Etowah was kind of dying, and Etowah's kind of been Etowah since then.
Yeah.
So Athens has grown, but Cleveland was growing like crazy.
Yeah.
You had, the Magic Chef started a long time ago, by the Reimer family back in the day, and Hardwick Clothes and the Dixie Foundry and all those, and so they opened a Lay's store in Cleveland, and they opened a Lay's store in Dayton. And my granddad, I think my Uncle Ed was born maybe in the mid-30s. I think he's 86 now. Ed's 86, I think, Uncle Ed. But he was born, and then Howard, and then my dad. And so they moved to Dayton. So my granddad, but all the boys were born right during that time they moved. So they had the Lay's store in Dayton, and they had the one in Cleveland. And they expanded and built several stores. Probably they had 6 or 8. They opened several in North Carolina, and also in Scottsboro, Alabama, and Bridgeport, Alabama. And the reason they did that is because all of my granddad's brothers, other than PB, who he started Lay's with, all the other brothers were in retail business, and they were in retail business in other parts of the South. But they all came, and I've got a picture of them right here. It's kind of cool. This is all the brothers right here.
All right, so point them out here.
So, well, I don't know all of them, but this is my granddad right there. That's DB right in the middle.
That's DB.
Yeah.
The guy that bought the
The
five
one
and dime.
the five and dime. That's right. But these are all the brothers right here.
Let's see now.
That's right. That's all the brothers, and that
I see some
you
similarities.
see some
yeah.
resemblance there. It's pretty funny to look at
Especially
that.
right in here.
You're right in there.
See
Yeah.
right in there.
Yep. But they all, when they expanded, they all.
That looks like Ed.
Yeah. Yep. But they all ran a store. Okay. They all became managers of the store.
Wonder what year this was taken.
That's probably in the 40s, if I had to guess. But here's the craziest part of that whole story, and this is the part of the story that I had heard tales about that I didn't ever realize. You had the Depression, the Roaring '20s, then you had the Great Depression, right? Then you had World War II.
42.
Yeah. And when my granddad lived in Dayton, he became friends with Judge Woodley, who was the county judge in Ray County. His last name Woodley. And he wanted to expand Laying Company. And these are actually all the original board members, by the way, of Laying Company.
At that time, they had how many?
They had 8 stores.
8 stores.
And they were wanting to expand their footprint and go do some stores in North Georgia, more in Carolina. They wanted to come expand up towards Oak Ridge and Maryville and Alcoa, Knoxville. They wanted to go expand the
That was
footprint.
a new idea during that
It
period,
was.
wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Well, you had a few players. You had Woolworths. You had McCrory's. Do you remember some of these names?
No,
These
I
are
remember Woolworths.
These are all five and dime stores. Roses.
Roses,
Roses.
Woolworths. Woolworths was
So-
before Roses.
My granddad, and Judge Woodley bought and purchased. Now, this is not an embellishment. They bought 17,000 acres in Ray County, up on top of Dayton Mountain. Not 17, not 170.
Summer City, somewhere, is that what it's
Above
called?
Spring City,
yeah.
up on the
Yeah.
plateau. Not 1,700 acres, but 17,000 acres
God,
in 1946. Now,
what were they thinking?
take a guess what they paid for that land back then.
$10 an acre?
No, they paid $8,000 for that land.
Golly.
$8,000 for 17,000 acres. They sat on it for 9 years, and they sold it for $2 million. And that's a lot. Think about that. That's a lot of money.
That's a big jump, too.
And the reason that they sold it for as much because they started strip mining coal. They found coal on it. Now to this day, I wish that land was still in the family. I'd probably be on an island somewhere sipping something cold and relaxing. Because in today's market, that land, 17,000 acres up there, worth about $56 million.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of money. So Judge Woodley took his million, and he just stayed judge, and I don't know what he did with the money. I'm sure that the family's pretty well off. But my granddad took $500,000 and kept $500,000 personally, and took $500,000 and put it into Laying Company, and he became chairman. He became president and chairman of the board
Of these 8 stores.
That's right.
This little small chain.
That's right. Then they incorporated. They became Laying Company Incorporated. So in between that time, they expanded, and I won't bore you with all the details where here, but by the end of it, and when Ed became president, in the 60s, and Howard was vice president, my dad was treasurer secretary. My dad was in charge of real estate.
That's where he learned.
That's where he learned. I mean, Ed and Howard were all involved in all the decision and all the board of directors. And by that time, my granddad was on the board, but also Stax Mayfield from here in Cleveland was on the board. Judge Woodley from Dayton was on the board. P.B. Swafford, who was president of the First National Bank in Dayton, was on the board. But they had different business people on the board. It wasn't just brothers. Okay.
How many stores were they had?
They had about 16. But in the '60s, when my dad and his brothers took over, they expanded, and they ended up with close to 40 by the time it was all said and done. And the year I was born, I think my dad told me that all the Lay's stores did $1 million in sales. Which, if you think about it, that's quite a bit of money back then.
Yeah. So in 1963, they had 16 stores.
16, 17, somewhere in there.
And so the three boys, shortly after, get out of UT Knoxville.
They expanded tremendously.
It came down to help. Your dad's on the board.
Yes.
And they take it to 44.
The 42, somewhere between 40 and 44. I don't remember exactly, but they had, they had stores in Alabama. They had stores in Georgia. They had stores in North Carolina. They had one in Murphy.
Did they have a warehouse somewhere?
Yeah, they did here in Cleveland. They built a warehouse here in Cleveland. The original warehouse was downtown. Then they had what was a new warehouse, which is right across from the Elks Lodge. That's where where Agora is now, right across from the Elks Lodge.
Right behind the Agora.
Right. Yes, the Agora.
And, that's
Nick Lilios developed that.
Yeah, but weren't they in that printing place at one time?
The retail store was in Donaldson Printing.
Donaldson Printing. That's exactly right.
At 5 Points.
David Perkle's place.
That's right. That's where originally the first Lay's store was right across from Merchants Bank, right on Ocoee Street. Okay, right.
I think I was in there with him one time, and he told me that the retail store was on the bottom, and they stored extra stuff upstairs. I think that's what he told me.
That's exactly the way it
because
worked.
it had a ramp.
That's exactly right. And right there, there's a running company in there now. That's where the original Lay's store was. And I've got pictures from the 30s that shows that store. You can see it down the street.
Now, see, prior to that, my understanding was it was Able Hardware.
It was Able Hardware prior to that. So it just kind of morphed, migrated. And then they moved to 5 Points, which is where David Perkle's place. They had the store there. Yeah. But the warehouse was right there, right across from the Elk Lodge. That brick building, which is now apartment complexes and retail, right behind Catch.
Right.
And then they built the warehouse out on Hardeman Lane, which is behind Georgia Pacific.
Which would have had to have been, I think that would have had to have been.
In the 70s is when they did that.
70s.
But that building there now is Eaton Corporation Hydraulics Division. It was a huge warehouse, but that's where they did all their distribution and warehousing back there. So I got a good story about this is my dad told me that he was in the Lay's store, and I want to say it was Calhoun, Georgia. They had a store in Calhoun, Georgia. And this is in the late 70s. And Sam Walton walked into Lay's store, the guy that started Walmart. And they had a conversation. Now, my dad told me he doesn't remember the conversation. But at that particular time, Walmart was Midwest, and they had 800 stores at the time.
Is that right?
Yes. But they had not moved to the southeast part of the country yet. Mm-hmm. They were right on the verge of that in the late 70s. And they started coming, obviously, they started in Arkansas. They started coming to Louisiana, and they started into Mississippi, West Tennessee, eventually Alabama, East Tennessee, North Georgia, Kentucky, Murphy, Western North Carolina. At that particular time, Woolworth had 2,600 stores, believe it or not.
Bigger than Walmart.
Walmart at the time. And Lay and Company had those 40, and they were doing about 35 or 40 million in sales in the early to mid 80s. Mm-hmm. But when Walmart came to town, they shut the company down. They couldn't compete. And what's funny about that is everybody else shut down too. Woolworth went out of business. Walmart put everybody out of business.
But now, my first memory of Lay's was when when I went to Cleveland Junior High, and we'd leave junior high and walk through the field, which was Galen now.
Yeah.
Through the you could go under the fence and go to the back door of Lay's.
The old Cleveland Mall. It's
The
when
old
they
Cleveland
moved
Mall,
it from
yeah.
5 Points to the new mall.
Do you remember that?
I do.
See, that's what I remember.
My first job was there
At the store.
at the store.
Do you remember how much the Cokes were?
They weren't very
Small
much.
one?
15 cents maybe or something.
8.
8 cents. But my fondest memory of that was at Easter. They had the green and the yellow chickens, the little bitty birds. You
I
know,
don't remember that
you could buy them at Easter time. That's one thing they were known for.
Do you remember Jenkins was in that mall at that time?
It was.
Not many people remember
Right,
that.
right up on the right, going out.
And they had red baskets. Remember?
Yeah, that was in. I think that was in the bicentennial year of 1976. Is when they opened that store.
Right. I believe you're exactly right.
But that was a great
I was
store.
in like 7th grade or 8th
That's right.
grade.
So generally,
So things were rolling.
things were rolling.
Things were rolling.
Things were rolling. And what's funny, when I was talking to my dad about all this, and my Uncle Ed and Uncle Howard have all this knowledge as well, which I'd love to pick their brain about it, my dad. But Lay's had generally been a downtown retail establishment. Mm-hmm. Downtown Dayton, downtown Cleveland, downtown Athens, downtown.
Athens, Etowah.
And in that 70s, you started getting malls, more and more malls. And these malls, like the old Cleveland Mall, the Village Mall was downtown, right?
Right.
Then you had the Cleveland Mall kind of on the outskirts of town. And in the 70s, you started getting all this footprint. And Lay's, the leadership, Ed and Howard and Ken and the board, they realized that if we wanted to continue to grow our business, we needed to have our stores in malls because that's where people were shopping.
And that was true at the time.
True at the time. So that's the reason they moved to the Cleveland Mall. And they were one of the anchor tenants, J.C. Penney. Of course, Rose's was on the other end, which was a competitor.
I guess they were a competitor.
They were a competitor, that's right.
That probably was not a good move for them to allow Rose's to be on the same building.
Yeah, probably not. But they had to compete and they had to change. But I asked my dad, I said, Walmart was huge. I said, I get Lay and Company going out of business in 1985. And, they tried to do it with integrity. They sold all their inventory. They paid all their stockholders. They tried to do it.
They just closed up.
They closed up. They tried to do it the right way. They didn't bankrupt the company and make off with a bunch of money and not. They honored all their leases. And my understanding, they just closed. And along with a bunch of other people, just like them. Like I mentioned, some of the few Woolworths,
Revco.
Yeah, Woolworths, McCrory's,
Kresge's.
Kresge's.
Yeah.
Kresge's Five and Dime was a competitor. They shut down. And some of these places had hundreds of stores. And I asked my dad, I said, what did Walmart do different? What did they do different from a business perspective that made them so much more competitive? What did they do? He said, when we ran Lay & Company, we bought our inventory and we paid for our inventory. And then we sold our inventory. Walmart was one of the, if not the first, one of the first retail establishments that set up terms with their suppliers.
Kind of like, if we sell it, we'll pay you.
Exactly.
Sort of thing.
Exactly.
They've done wallpaper that way for years.
Exactly.
Consignment. If we sell it, we'll buy it. If we don't, you can come pick it up.
That's right.
So they just took that idea.
They established terms, and they started importing all their goods, and they established terms. So their cash flow was catastrophically. They were a catastrophic advantage on cash, because when you're buying all your inventory that you're going to sell and putting it in a warehouse, you have all that inventory carrying cost.
Yeah, it's probably
Walmart was selling it, and sometimes selling it 2 or 3 times before they had to pay the bill to their supplier.
And probably riding people.
Probably right, and I don't know what their terms were. Net 30, net 45, net 60. There's no telling. But that was their business model, and that's the reason that they are the largest company, one of the largest companies in the world now, because they were the first to do that, which was brilliant at the time. But they somebody's always got a great idea, D.
You know,
And they did it.
I always think the person in charge is the one with the best idea.
It's true.
No matter what the situation, whoever's got the best idea is the one in charge.
That's exactly right. And Sam Walton,
He just had the best idea.
He had the best
for
idea
the time.
for the time.
And a lot of times, if you've been in business a while, you can't see how you need to change because you're just busy managing and going through that gerbil wheel or whatever.
Oh yeah.
You don't have time to say, hey, they're doing it this way over here. That's a good idea. We'll start doing it that way. You don't have time to do that.
No. And nobody has a crystal ball, right?
Nobody.
But there's every now and then you're going to run into a brilliant business person that like a Sam Walton, who has a vision, who thinks outside the box, who had enough muscle maybe to shut his office door while everybody else is running the company.
Maybe, yeah.
And,
See, I couldn't do that.
And you got Ed and Howard and Ken over here, sweeping floors and making decisions and visiting and trying to expand and all that.
And all the relatively the same period of their lives.
Yes.
So in other words, if there was 20 years separating their ages, somebody might have come up with seen some. Sometimes you can just, not even necessarily a good idea, but you can see trends.
You can.
You can see how malls aren't working anymore.
That's right. And it's kind of funny because I was talking to my dad about this, and he said, we probably could have stayed in business, but we just felt like that we just didn't want to go into catastrophic amounts of debt to try to keep up with that. And anyway, they all went their separate ways. Going back to your comment when you first met my dad, he got into business with Joe Rogers Jr. and they did some developments together. One of which was, Joe did the Farmland Corner, and my dad helped, and that's how you met my dad. But my dad had most of his involvement at Lay's was in the real estate arm and the development of expanding, the building new stores. This is a picture of the grand opening in Alcoa right here. Alcoa, Tennessee. That was one of the first. That was their biggest store. That's in the 70s.
This had to be in the 70s.
70s.
Can you get this, Gwen?
Yeah, that's a pretty good little
You can
picture right there.
You can tell what they're wearing and the ties.
That's right. And I've got all
That's
kinds
typical.
of
Bell bottoms were
oh yeah,
almost out by then.
yeah. And I got a few more pictures that they're kind of cool. This is a picture of one of the stores. This is you can see my dad, and that's my grandmother there to the far, on this far side. That's Mildred.
Which one's this one at?
That's in the Alcoa store.
Alcoa, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a pretty good picture. That's back in the 60s, I think, or somewhere in that time frame. Here's a picture that was. This is from when they were at 5 Points. This is a pretty good picture right there when they were at 5 Points downtown Cleveland here.
Boy, that's perfect.
Isn't that great?
People should always date photos.
Yep.
But this one's dated 5, 10, 25 cent Lay's.
That's right. And it's pretty cool, isn't it?
Lay's. A variety shop. That's what they're called.
Yeah, and here, they've got pictures of the inventory here.
I'll bet you this bottom facade's still on there.
It very well could be. This is just a picture of what the store looked like there. The retail.
Mm-hmm. That's typical.
Yeah. And this is a guy that was a
curtain rods, flowers.
This is a gentleman named Jim Askins, who was one of our store managers. I think he really grew up on Bow Street, lived on Bow Street in Cleveland.
Got a pretty wife. So.
Yeah. Her name was Nell.
Nell.
Yeah, great people. Yep. Another good fun fact I'll tell you about the company. One of the guys that worked for Lay & Company for years was a gentleman named Jasper Lacey. And our good friend Alan Jones, he likes this story. Jasper and Mary Ann Lacey lived in Edgewood, where I live now, and he worked for Lay & Company. And they had a son named Alan Lacey. And I don't know if you know that name or not. Mm-mm. But Alan Lacey was one of Alan Jones's good friends, and And Alan Lacey went to Cleveland High School, and his dad worked for Lane Company. Alan became the CEO of Sears and Roebuck.
I've heard this. I think I remember Alan talking
Corporation. And Alan retired as CEO of Sears and Roebuck. But his dad was Jasper, who worked for Lane Company for years. So Alan was around that retail environment.
Sure.
And when I lived in Chicago, Alan lived in Chicago. At the time, he was working for Kraft Corporation at the time.
Did you know him then, or
I
visit
did.
him then?
I went to dinner with him 2 or 3 times. He took me out to dinner. I got tickled because he was vice president of Kraft at the time before he went to work for Sears. And he was talking and trying to encourage me because I was telling him at the time how much money I was making, which wasn't much. And he told me that his car allowance was more than the money I was making. I got tickled because he was driving this nice car. You know, I think it was an Audi, or something like that. But he lived in Lake Forest, Illinois, which is one of the nicest areas of north of Chicago. And he took me to dinner one night. He would never let me buy. And I was asking him, I said, well, tell me about your house, you know, where you live and all that. He was telling me where he lives. Well, I live in a gated community, and he actually, you know, had a picture. I said, well, you know, do you have good neighbors, you know, and all that kind of stuff? And do you ever get to Cleveland? He said, yeah, my next door neighbor is Mr. T.
Is that right?
That's right. And I said, the guy that used to say pity the fool and wear a big gold chain and all that.
Don't you love it when
Yeah. He said, Mr. T's my next door neighbor. Matter of fact, he comes to my kids' birthday party every year. My boys, when they have birthday party, he comes to my birthday party. So, it's a small world, and I'm sure that Alan Lacey was a brilliant guy. You know, always a consummate gentleman, and he's into all the Wall of Fame at Cleveland High School, and a great alumni, and a good diplomat at Cleveland. But he was around Lane Company his whole life, just like I was. I'd see him at the warehouse out there playing, and we like to ride on.
How old is he?
Oh, I want to say he's probably late 60s, early 70s now.
So,
you know,
you want to talk about a success story from Cleveland? I guess that's a good one, isn't it?
That's a great.
That's
one.
got to be in the top 3.
It's got to be in the top 3. I mean, he's obviously a very wealthy guy now, but you know, he grew up from humble beginnings, and his dad was one of the chief guys of Lay's. He was.
Y'all started out the same.
Now, I'm not near as successful as he is, but it's a good story, and you know, it was such a time as this. They were in business from 1925 to 1985. They were in business for 60 years. They provided.
And they didn't go bankrupt.
No,
they just went out of business.
Went out of business.
They just said, "Hey, this isn't working for us." Just like if I went out of business.
Yeah, that's right. And over time, they provided.
How many years? 65.
60 years.
60.
They provided with all those stores. They provided thousands of jobs, hundreds of jobs for people to work, and provided a great product and for a lot of different communities.
And they were here from, what did you say, 35? 1934? 1934
to 1985.
To 1985.
They had a retail presence in Cleveland for that long.
That's a long time. That's a success story also.
And my dad, it's a funny story, my dad was born above the Lay's store in Dayton. They was born above the store. I guess a midwife or a nurse delivered him up there, which is kind of a cool story. But
your dad's a really nice guy.
He's a good guy. You know, he's done a lot in his life, and he knows a lot. And he kind of shared with me a lot of these facts, which I thought was a lot of fun. But you take a guy like my dad or my Uncle Howard or Uncle Ed. They've got great stories, and we have a great heritage where, my granddad's been here. They lived on Harl Avenue, right at the end of Centenary, right there.
Right across the street.
If you go down on Coy and make a right on Centenary, and you stop at Harl, it's the house right to your left right there.
Well, my dad grew up, I believe.
That's where they lived.
My dad grew up on Harl and Willow. Mm-hmm. That's where
just right up from there.
Where I stayed most of my life.
That's right.
That little building in the back was my workshop.
Yeah.
I was building houses in my mind.
Yeah. But we were close. We were close and probably didn't know it. But
No, did you ever go to Deer Park?
all the time, I'd walk. You just walk right down there and play in that creek.
Boy, people don't remember how that creek. You know what's funny is they've actually brought that creek back to the way in my mind that it looked in the beginning.
In the beginning,
And they've done all this. That we used to dip crawdads out of that creek. Do you remember that?
oh yeah,
People would literally
catch everything you'd catch.
they'd walk barefooted in that creek all day long.
And we'd go over there and stay with my grandmother, and met myself and my brother Stephen, who lives in Texas now. Charlie, my cousin, who was a contractor here in town for a long time.
Yeah.
And now is I guess the chief foreman for Kurt Lambert's company.
Main guy, I guess.
Yeah, main guy for Lamcon.
Yeah.
And my cousin Andy, who is an accountant in Chattanooga, who's a school board member. Andy Lay, he's city school board. And and then my cousin Julie, who lives in Nashville, who's Howard's daughter. All of us would go to my grandmother's, and we would just walk down to Deer Park because you didn't have to worry about kids. You just go anywhere you want to go and play and do whatever you want to do.
Boy,
back
those
in the day.
swings, you could really get going on those swings. You remember
Big time.
you could really get going.
And you'd always compete to who jumped off the furthest.
Mm-hmm.
And that's before they had a soft landing. You just landed in the dirt. If you cut, you got cut. You got cut.
You just didn't go. You didn't go further than you knew you couldn't hang on.
That's right. But yeah, so that's a little bit. It's kind of fun to think about all that. And I love the story of my papa, my granddad, my papa, my mama, because they were Cleveland people and contributed to the city and to the county for a long time.
And almost in a sense, unsung heroes. In a, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, a little bit.
I mean, they were here for a long time.
Long time. They're just two of many that have made Bradley County and Cleveland what it is, right? Those old line families that have been here for a very long time.
Well, they just got up and went to work every day, and
got up and went to work.
Usually half a day Saturday or all day Saturday.
Yeah, most and of course back then nobody was open on Sunday, but Saturday was your big retail day.
Saturdays was till 2 or 3.
That's right. Yeah. Then of course they stayed open till 5, and then eventually stayed on 9. But my grandmother worked in the store. She didn't stay home with the boys. Of course, my dad and my Uncle Ed and Uncle Howard and my dad all went to Arnold because it was just right there. They could spit to the school. They walked to school every day, and they had a gentleman that actually raised them. His name was Nat. That was his name. He was their nanny.
Sort of live-in nanny.
Live-in nanny, and he raised them because my grandmother was working at the store.
She felt more important to be at the store.
That's right.
And of course, she was there at night, I'm sure.
Yeah, she was there at night, of course, yeah. But during the day, and Nat was there. And of course, when they were 7th graders, they all went to McCauley. They sent them to private school.
All 3 of them?
All 3 of them. Did.
For the rest of the time?
For the rest of the high school, all went there.
So they were doing They
were doing really well.
Yeah.
And then they went to UT.
Because you don't go to McCauley.
No.
Normally.
No, I didn't go to McCauley. I didn't want to. But all 3 of both my uncles and my dad went there.
They were all educated.
All very well educated, and that's just the way my granddad wanted it. And back then, like you said, they were doing very well, doing extremely well.
When they closed up at the mall, what was the state of the mall in '84? I can't really remember. That's when the year that you graduate from high school, that next couple years is really just kind of a blur.
Yeah, it is.
You can't really remember what you're doing. You're just trying to get something going.
Well, yeah, you kind of are. You kind of hit that mountaintop, which is your graduation.
Yeah.
And then you kind of, just like Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a good plan until somebody punches you in the mouth.
That's right.
Right?
In the nose.
In the nose, he said. Yeah. And that's kind of all of us, right? Now what am I going to do? I went off to college, but honestly, I really don't remember what happened to the mall. I remember Three things I remember about the Cleveland Mall. Well, actually more than three. I remember Jenkins, of course.
Yeah.
Because there was nothing else like Jenkins. And we get to go to Jenkins to eat was a real treat.
Yeah.
I remember the caramel corn.
I remember the caramel.
You remember caramel corn coming in?
I remember they were there. Yeah.
Of course, I remember Lay's because I worked there.
Remember when the guy got murdered in there?
I do, and that was terrible. I remember the game room.
That's where he got. That's the guy that.
But it was down by Rose's.
Well, he worked. That's where the guy worked.
That's right. But everybody went to the game room. And I don't remember Fantasy World or something like that. Maybe that was another one. But the game room was in the mall. But the arcade. But I think the mall was doing pretty good, and I think the mall continued to do good even after Lay's because they got a tenant in there. I don't remember who it was, but even after Lay's went out of business, they got somebody to occupy that space. But I don't remember who it was. I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
But
it was just the writing on the wall by '85.
Oh yeah, it was, unfortunately. And like I said, they could have probably went to a big bank and got a big line of credit to try to hang on,
or do something different.
Or
just
do something different.
Change their. A lot of these companies, they change the way they're going. Gas stations will have a fast food on the end, and then they change to where they're not, and so they're all the time modifying and adjusting. Like those incremental things we were talking about, you just got to be aware.
That's right.
And keep changing, or you'll just go out.
My dad was telling me when they had their board meeting to make this decision, it was gut wrenching for them. They didn't want to do it. They didn't want to close.
And probably a lot of not sure what to do, and
a lot of sweat equity.
Yeah.
And there's actually a few of the guys. One guy in particular named Mike Huffaker, who was a brilliant guy. Actually moved to Arkansas and got a job working for Walmart, and ended up being the number 4 or number 5 guy at Walmart by the time his career was over there. Believe it or not, that came from Lay & Company.
Was there any thoughts in selling to somebody like Walmart?
I think there probably was, but I think people had their model. And they
were freestanding.
They wanted to watch, rinse, repeat their own model. They wanted to clone. They didn't want to get anybody else's.
With Lay's, they had come from the era of downtown, in this building that's connected to 3 other buildings.
That's right.
In downtown, and that went with the malls because they're connected. And then Walmart came out and said, we're going to go just a little bit outside of the city, just one hair, and we're going to have a freestanding building.
That's exactly what they did.
And we're not going to pay for our stuff. We're going to buy it if it sells.
That's right.
And that's it.
They had terms.
And they did stay open longer.
They did, and they were highly automated, from what I understand. They had great automation, and I think the key was they had terms with their suppliers. Send us all this stuff, and we'll sell through it and turn it twice or turn it 3 times. They would turn their inventory, and then they would pay their suppliers, so they were cash rich.
Well, when you got 800 stores, you say, hey, we're going to let you sell it in here, but we're not going to buy it unless we sell it. They say, well, we'll take a shot. You got 800 stores.
That's exactly right.
You just don't have a choice.
And you know what? Kudos to them.
It worked, yeah. That model could not have worked in 1942.
No, it wouldn't. No,
it was the Lay's 5 and dime model.
That's right.
So things just changed.
And there's always somebody who's on the front end and the cutting edge of something. And in that retail world, Sam Walton was that guy. And I enjoyed hearing all the story. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to think that Lay & Company was still in business now, and we maybe developed a Dollar General model. I mean, Dollar General's done great by building a little small store out in the middle of nowhere where there might be 50 people living within 20 miles, right?
Well, let's take it with say my industry, the building business. If they came out and said, okay, from now on, in order to compete, you've got to do it. You've got to build 200 buildings a year, et cetera, et cetera. I would just say I'm not interested. That's not what I want to do. So it's not that I can't do it or I can't compete or I can't change or I don't know it. It's just not what I'm interested in doing. I don't want to play the piano either. So all I want to do is what I'm doing. And when it stops working, I'll just quit. And that's what Lay's did.
That's right.
So there's nothing negative.
Yeah, and I've heard this over time. People think that everybody that was there left wealthy and rich and all that. I can tell you that wasn't what happened. That wasn't what happened at all. My dad had to go go to work, and Ed ran and started some successful businesses in Cleveland. My Uncle Ed and my Uncle Howard did too. They didn't leave there, even though they all had invested piles of money back into Lay and Company stock. By the time they did do the right way, there wasn't much meat on the bone.
No, but it kept them. They made a living.
No, they made a living. They did it the right way. That's
raised
the thing.
a family.
Oh yeah.
How you gonna? What more can you really ask for?
My dad educated me. Educated my brother. We both went to UT, and I got a kid there too. So my youngest son's will be a fourth generation ball. So
boy, raising kids is harder than you ever get just scared
every day.
It's hard to explain.
It is hard to explain. It's I've a lot of laying there at night, and a lot of prayer, a lot of fingers crossed, a lot of hoping that you taught them the right way early, to where it sticks, even though they might deviate here and take a detour here and there.
Have you ever noticed that by the time you've realized that what you do around your kids is so influential, it's no longer influential? Because what you've already done, it's over.
It's over.
That's the only time
they're programmed.
They're programmable anyway.
That's
and
right.
by the time you realize it's important, they're no longer programmable, so it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's just luck.
That's right. Between Melody and I, my wife now, we've got four kids and three grandsons, believe it or not. I'm a granddad.
So that's 7 people you're hoping don't have a wreck tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
You ever get phone calls and think, oh man,
yeah.
Even though it's not you just see that number, think, oh, I hope nothing's wrong.
Yeah. Sometimes it's funny. One of the greatest lessons, and I don't know if you've had Jeff Lovingood on here.
Oh yeah.
So Jeff Lovingood is a friend of mine, and he's a character.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget one thing he said. He said, there comes a point where you're not a parent anymore. You're just an advisor.
Well,
you become an advisor, and with both of my sons, Turner and Jared, my oldest son Turner lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and my youngest son Jared, he's a senior at UT Knoxville. He graduates in May. Get a pay raise in May, hopefully.
Yeah.
I really struggled with that transition. I wanted to joystick them and stay in that parent mode.
Yeah, I'm still there.
And I had to realize that they need me to be more an advisor than a parent. But the days of saying you need to, or have shifted to, hey son, what do you think about this? It's a completely different approach.
And really, you almost get to where you're not even sure if we're advising them right, because we're not exactly sure either. Because by then they're into stuff that we're not even really. Do we know we're even right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, things have changed so much. You got to kind of go back to your core values and your core principles to the extent that you can, and you kind of have to drop these strategic reminders because they're their own person. They're their own vessel. They're free. They're free spirits. They're not saplings anymore. They're trees.
And I don't really know if we, both of my kids, by the time they were 1 year old, they hadn't changed any since then. So I mean, they're just really what they are.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's much we can do anyway.
Yeah, I mean they've got their genetic programming. Obviously, you hopefully that all your kids and all the way down your line, right? Your lineage, Burris for decades to come, or Lay's for decades.
The incremental changes.
You hope that everybody gets the best genetic traits of everybody, right? You hope they do, and you hope that they're even more productive citizens and give back in ways, in bigger and better ways than you and I can even think about. That's kind of my hope.
My hope is that they're happy.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I'm not really sure that it matters. I just want them to be happy. Does that make sense?
It does.
Just be happy.
I had this discussion with both my boys. They just said, well, I just want to do the right thing. And I said, I've tried to teach them, and I've not always, for goodness gracious, I've not always taken my own advice. But I said, let me take that a step further. You can always try to do the right thing, but I want you to try to always do the wise thing. And sometimes there's a difference between doing the right thing and the wise thing. I'll never forget
not many people could make that statement, but that is what you're saying is really true.
It's very true.
It's so nuanced.
It's nuanced. My oldest son asked me, he said, well, what do you mean? What's the difference between wise and right? I said, well, let me give you an example. I said, do you remember driving to Cleveland High School, and you would always talk about the intersection of Raider Drive and Key Street being so dangerous? Been a lot of bad wrecks there, as you know, right? Remember, used to be Shoney's and all that, and used to be the gondolier up on the hill, and Duff's Mortgage. Remember, it was Duff's Mortgage.
Yeah. I remember Duff's.
But the intersection's changed a lot over the years, and unfortunately, traffic in Cleveland and just growth of our community and our town. I said, if you're going in front of Life Care and you're going down Key Street going towards town, people can get going pretty fast right there, right? You got
bicycle or running or driving.
Running or driving. Yeah. And I said, if you're going down through there and you're going 50 or 55, and that light at Raider Drive turns yellow, and you look in your rear view mirror, and there's an 18-wheeler behind you, and he's real close to you, and the light turns red, and you know if you hit the brakes, that 18-wheeler might plow you through that intersection, what are you going to do?
That's a good example.
And I said,
you got to break the rules.
I said, the wise thing to do is get in the gas, go on through there. The right thing to do would be to stop because you're breaking the law. And he goes, I completely understand what you're saying. And I said, son, I'm not advocating that the wise thing to do is always breaking the law. What I'm saying is you need to look at every circumstance and you need to ask the question, in spite of my past experiences, my present circumstances, and my future hopes and dreams, what's the wise thing to do? Right
now. All things considered.
All things considered, what's the wise thing to do? And I've tried to teach my kids, of course, to do the right thing. But sometimes you got to break it down a little bit further. What's the wise thing to do? I can afford that car payment, but should I buy that car? May not be the wise thing to do.
And I don't judge, I don't look at people and judge them by what they're doing. I always think, I just don't know what their situation is. And you also don't know how they're looking at it. It may not be their situation. It may just be how they're looking at it. That made them make that decision.
It is. If a person can ever develop a mastery of that on a daily basis, and every day we've got these touch points, right? You go to breakfast, you meet with subs. Yeah. I meet with customers. You meet with people you hadn't seen in years. You meet with your banker. You meet with your lawyer. You talk to your parents. You talk to your siblings. You got all these touch points. if most of the time we're thinking about ourselves, I'm guilty of it every day. But if you could ever develop the mindset and the mastery of, I wonder what that person's going through today, or I have no idea. Man, this so and so's not acting the same. You know, Rick at Rick's Plumbing, man, he's never late, but he's late. You know what? Wonder what happened to him today. If we could ever do that, I think we would see a better world, don't you?
Oh yeah, we've got to give. We gotta assume the people are going through something that we're going through, and when you sense that, you don't hit them with stuff you need them from them.
That's right.
You let them be.
One of the best people I've ever known I've been privileged to be a friend with is a friend of mine, a guy named David Goodwill.
I know David.
And David,
he's like perfect.
He's I get so many big chunks of wisdom from that guy when I get to spend time with him. You know, he's been through a lot recently, lost his wife, and when I get a chance to unpack my week or my day or what's been going on with that guy, and I got a lot of people like that in my life. David's just one that pops in my head.
Well, if you got him in one ear and
loving good in the other,
loving good in the other,
I should be perfect, shouldn't I?
You're like the worst one of the three.
I know that's a true story right there. I should be a much better man than I am having the friends that I have. But you know, we all walk with a limp. We all walk with a limp, and you know, a guy like David just always sometimes has got the secret sauce. Man, he tends to.
He has a calming effect on me.
It's unbelievable. Just such a great guy, and you know, his story is a great story. But you know, the whole goal is to grab those nuggets and try to adopt some of the habits, the best habits of the people that we know, and our tendency is to be about ourselves. Try to make sure you're asking how everybody's doing. You know, don't just be sure that people know that you care about them, and regardless of who it is or how small, right?
Yeah, and not be the one that's going to laugh or judge or make fun of. Be the guy that say, "Hey, I'm not going to mention that."
Yeah, it's a discipline, and you know, it's our tendency is to go the other direction. I mean, it's hard. We need to be purposeful to be better people, and really show that we care. I mean, and there are opportunities to do that. You got rental property. I got rental property. Wes Rogers and I own some rental property. You got a whole lot more rental property than I do. But there comes a time where if you sense that somebody is really trying to get it done, but yet they might get behind, but you know they're trying.
Yeah.
Give them a little grace.
I see it as a partner. Rentals, I see as a partnership between me and them.
Yeah.
We're just trying to get it paid for.
Yeah.
And it's not a business that I'm trying to not work from.
That's right.
It's just, let's break even here.
That's right. And you got a chance to meet all kinds of different people in there.
I got a lady that's lived in one of mine. She's been there since I was 21.
You're kidding.
Her rent's $265, and I've never gone up.
Are you kidding me?
Property taxes and insurance are more than the rent.
Wow. She's been with you that long?
Yeah, no problem.
Wow.
But I mean, you know, if anybody deserves a discount, she does.
That's right. Because she stayed and probably paid faithfully, right?
Oh, yeah.
Takes care of her place.
Yeah, that's just not rock the boat, man.
I know.
On the Courthouse Square at 30 2nd Street is the law firm of Logan Thompson Law. Since 1965, they have served the legal needs for the good citizens of Cleveland Bradley County. If you've got a problem, they're no problem. Give them a call. Rental business is a long-term play. And when you look at it as a short-term play, most of those people go out of business.
They do, don't they?
That's the wrong business for this. There's no magic to this rental business.
Yeah. I'd like to pick your brain about that. We may have to do that off the camera one of these days, but I'm I'm just so fortunate to live in this community. I could live anywhere. Melody and I could move and live in Nashville. We could live.
Yeah.
I've got places I could live that would be a whole lot more easier on me, considering I have to go to Louisville, Kentucky quite a bit. I drive because I've got stops along the way. I'd much rather live in Nashville because it's closer. But
Louisville's a hard place to get to from here.
It is.
You have to go.
I'd go up 75 to Lexington,
like that, and then
across 64.
I go.
You go to Nashville?
Or no, to Lexington.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like going through Nashville. Sorry, Nashville. I don't like going through Nashville because it's getting to be more like Atlanta traffic wise. It's awful. But I could live anywhere. But I want to see our community continue to have its heritage, and the long line families stay here and invest in the place, invest in Bradley County and Cleveland, and grow with it and watch it become even a better city than it already is, which it's a great city. It's one of the best cities its size in the whole country. And people tell you that. That's my deal,
Do you think that we need to be looking, do we need to be thinking more progressive about, I don't want to go sit on the couch and say, oh, great, I've made it. Whew. That'd drive me insane.
Yeah.
I've got to be trying to climb a mountain.
Yeah.
But it's getting to where I have to create a mountain, a fake mountain in my mind. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't have to try to make a living no more. I don't have to, I almost have to come up with a fake why.
Yeah.
But I think a fake why works just as well.
Yeah, it does. That's a good question, and it's. I think all of us want to do the quote unquote American dream, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's something you hear. We've heard it our whole lives.
Our whole life.
What is that? What is
chicken in every pot?
Yeah. How do you define that?
Yeah.
I think peace of mind is the top of the list of that. And that can come from a lot of different things, right? Peace of mind.
And it's different for everybody.
Different for everybody. I think we get, and you move on up in age, and you've worked, you've got your sweat equity, you've got a ton of it in a lot of different things. I've got a lot of it in my career. A lot of miles traveled, lots of millions of emails, probably millions of phone calls. We get to that point and we say, what's next? Right. What's next?
Yeah.
I think I want to be able to do the data. I want to be able to do the data dump. That's my goal. My next thing, one of these days when I quote unquote retire and maybe do something different, I like doing interviews like this just to tell a story. Go to our high schools and talk to the business class and let them ask you questions. Meet up with and a younger business person here in town that's hungry, that's trying to start a business or do a business, and let them ask you a few questions.
Become a mentor.
Be kind of a mentor.
What they call it, a sage.
Yeah.
The Chinese have Chinese.
Yeah. Give back.
Culture has a saying for that.
Give back, and a lot of people think that's weird. They don't think that's a lost art. They think it's antiquated. They think it's a dinosaur, that type of thing. I disagree. I think we need to be doing more of that kind of stuff. I think we I think we should, and I think there's a way to do that, and there's a healthy way to do that, and without necessarily giving away all the ways you do it to be successful. Some people
I wouldn't even care to tell them what I think
Sure.
was it, but you don't even know if
It's up to them.
There's not a worse critic of me than me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard for me to advise somebody when I think I'm not doing it correct anyway.
Yeah.
So you know what I'm saying? It's sort of like,
I think we have to be able to look at where our sweet spot is and what we're really good at, and not try to. For me, I don't want to try to be all things to all people. Okay, if somebody is struggling with how to sit down and have a conversation with somebody, and I feel like that I'm pretty good at that, that's going to be my focal point to try to help somebody out. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, I've got a problem with managing my time, and I'm not good at managing my time, then I don't need to be talking to somebody about how to manage their time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think we need to look at our gifts and our attributes that I believe are God-given, and if there's opportunities to help people out, do it that way. That's how I see it. That's the lens I see it through.
So are we stopping doing what we're doing, going into advisory?
No.
You know what I'm saying? Because we can't really do. Can we do both? Because I'm out of time.
Well, the second hand moves at the same pace that it always has. I feel like I'm out of time too a lot of days. And my wife told me this. I said, how come we feel like we don't have time to do anything, or we don't have as much time as we used to? She said, well, time started speeding up for me when I started paying bills. And I thought about that, and I've thought about that, and I've thought about that, and I still think about that. But there's got to be some truth in that, because I felt like days would never end before I started paying bills. Now I feel like there's not enough days and not enough hours and not enough seconds, because next thing you know, Cleveland Utilities is due again.
Yeah. There's an old saying, if you want time to speed up, get a 90-day note.
But no, it's true. But I really feel like when a human being starts paying bills,
she's got a good point.
Everything speeds up. It's like, oh, it's due again. But it's really not. It's just your framework. It's how you see things. And but how do we do both? I think you just have to say no to some things, and you have to pump the brakes, and you have to say, I'm gonna carve out some time for X, Y, Z, and I'm just gonna do it. And this can wait. When you're a go-getter, I'm a go-getter. You're a go-getter. When you're type A go-getter,
it's hard to stop.
It's hard to stop. It's hard to say no. It's hard to.
You're like her dad was, Stan. It's hard to say no.
Hard to say no. It's hard to say no. Hey, I'm locked out of my apartment. It's 10:30. Somebody calls me. I got a bag of keys in my car. I beat up one of my.
I can leave my slippers on. Right?
Yeah. And there's part of me that says, this is the third time in the last 6 months that you've locked yourself out of your apartment, and I told you to put a spare key somewhere. Yeah. You know what? I'm not coming. Call a locksmith. Here's the number. Versus, I really don't want to do this, but I need to go do this, type thing.
I'll be back in just a minute.
But, learning when to say no and learning when to say yes in business is really hard. I want people. I don't ever want to let somebody down, especially a customer.
That's me.
You're talking about something that keeps me awake. When I've got people that are not happy with our company or what I do, some people they're just like, it's going to happen. They're just laissez-faire about it. They're just not going to get worked up about it. I'm not that way. It keeps me awake at night. I want to do everything I can to fix it.
Can an unknown phone call on Friday about something from an area code from a place that could be a spam call, but it can worry me to death all weekend.
Yeah.
Not even have nothing to do with it.
If I get those, I will go to Google and Google that area code because it might be a customer that's moved to somewhere that's working for GE, but they hadn't got their phone number changed.
Yeah.
But if they leave a voicemail, it's usually a pretty good indicator. But I'll sit there and go wonder who that was. Maybe should I call them back or text them or that type of thing. But when you're a hustler and a go-getter and you're wanting to capitalize on every opportunity that might come down your way, you worry about those calls.
I think it may be time to stop trying to capitalize on them and create a different fake why.
You need to write a book on that.
Another reason.
Yeah. You could write a book on that. That'd be a New York Times bestseller.
Your fake why?
Yeah. What's your fake why?
You know what I'm saying? Because it's all fake anyway, all the reasons, evidently.
Yeah.
Everything that we've talked about here, we couldn't have changed. It was just what happened.
That's exactly right.
So all we needed was to get up in the morning and do what we're doing, and we had a why. Now we just need another why. It just has to be a different why.
I want to look back at all this. My goal is to, everything we've talked about today here. I think the challenge for me personally, and to grow professionally and try to be a better human being, better husband, better friend, better mentor, better dad, better granddad, better poppy, better employee, better at my craft, is to not necessarily look in the rearview mirror, but to sometimes look at the richness of some of these things and be able to parlay that into being better, right? Look at this. Don't look at it as a negative. Don't see it as the glass half empty. See it as the glass half full. How can I look at the story of Lay and Company and all these guys and my dad and my uncles and my family and see what they did great and try to clone that and challenge my kids to do that on a daily basis. You said something that really stuck with me. Everybody's got a story. Everybody's got a story. Everybody's got something. You've had them. I've had them. And man, it is a breath of fresh air when somebody will stop me in a meeting and I'm trying to sell them something, right? That's my number one goal, is to walk out of here with a victory. They look at me and go, "How you been doing? How's your family?"
Boy, it'll diffuse you, won't it?
It's just like a soothing balm.
Yeah.
And sometimes seriously, let's just talk a minute before we get into business. How you doing? How's everything going? Last time you were up here, you said you were worried about your youngest kid, or you were worried, your grandson struggling, or your wife's not doing well. She had COVID twice, and she doesn't feel good. How's everything going? That's a lost start. We got to get back to that, man.
I can tell when people are doing it just to do it.
Oh yeah.
And they almost quit listening before you get the answer out. And other people, you sense that they really do want to know.
Yeah, we call that lip service, right?
Yeah.
I've been guilty of that, and I really don't want to do that. I don't want to be that guy, because the takeaway is that other person will walk away and go, "That was the hollowest, most hollow conversation that I've had."
Yeah, it makes me sick.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
And we need more people that will not do that.
Well, that you cannot do it if you really care.
Yeah. If you
If
truly
you don't care, you might as well just not even bring it up.
Your old buddy is my neighbor, Gene Officer.
Yep. Good friend of mine.
And that guy, if he sees me outside, 9 times out of 10, he'll stop. And he will roll the window down And it doesn't matter if he's in his truck. Doesn't matter if he's in his wife. I think she's got a Jeep. And doesn't matter if they're together. If they see me outside, they'll stop, roll the window down, and they'll say, "Hey, how's it going? How's Melody? Have you been traveling? How you doing? Come see us. If you need anything, let us know." And sometimes there's days when that just propels you through, whether it's from him or whether it's from you or whether it's from somebody that you know. It's kind of a shot in the arm that you need, and I think we
Shot
need
of B12.
We need that. We need that more than ever in the world, and our kids need to know how to do that. They're taught to be so self-focused and so self-consumed.
I know it. It's all that we're talking about. It's in Dale Carnegie.
It is.
It's just in Dale Carnegie.
That's
just
right.
read that book.
That's right. It sure is. One of my biggest things that I've shared. I went to this class in Atlanta on how to negotiate, and I'll just tell you, boy, I learned. I thought I was really good at it till I went to this class. I thought I was. Matter of fact, I thought I was great at it. I was thought, there's not anybody that I can't sell something to or win, right? And I went to this class, and you got this guy that's facilitating the class. You got all these business people. Like, you might be there from Burris Construction. Then you got a guy from IBM might be there. And then you got an executive in marketing that might be there. Then there might be a CPA there. Then there might be a doctor. There might be an attorney. There was 50 of us in the room. And they have all these, the whole thing is how to negotiate better, how to learn to negotiate. And they paired everybody up. And I went against a guy from not Dell Computer, Hewlett Packard, HP. And they give you a piece of paper, and one of you is the buyer and one of you is the seller. And in this case, I was the buyer and he was the seller. And you have all these facts on a piece of paper that they're willing to tell you about the situation about the seller. And then the seller has a piece of paper about facts about the buyer. But they don't tell you everything. They only tell you part of what you need to know. Well, this guy that I was up against, it's a competition because you're trying to win. It's basically who cuts the best deal, right? Who could cut the better deal? Who won the negotiation, if you will? And this guy was selling a tractor trailer. He had a trucking company, and he was trying to sell a tractor trailer. And I was starting. I, as the buyer, had bought a commercial warehouse building, and I needed a tractor trailer. And I had all these facts about how much that tractor trailer was worth at fair market value, and what I could buy it. But I'll never forget this. One of the things I didn't know is that he had fallen behind on his payments on that tractor trailer at the bank. And I didn't know that. And he needed to sell it really bad. But I ended up offering fair market value for it. But if I had known that he was behind on his payments, I could have bought it for what the bank payoff was. He was willing to sell it for $28,000. I paid $42,000. And I lost that competition. I lost that challenge. And point of that whole story is it was a great lesson on trying to see what might be going on the other side.
So there's skills to that.
There's
other
skills.
Than I've always thought it was kind of a sixth sense sort of thing.
If I had been really good at negotiation, I might have assumed that he was in a position of hurt. And I might have lowballed, because if I had thought in my mind, well, gosh, what if he's in trouble or behind on payments or owes the bank on this, I can even get a better deal. But all I was thinking was, I got to have that truck, because without that truck, I can't start my business. That was the lens that I was seeing it through. And the reason I tell you that story is, number one, it's a good business case study. There's always another side
Right.
when you're across the desk from somebody. And number two is the biggest human being life lesson is just you don't always know the whole story.
You don't
always know the whole story.
And in fact, you never know the whole story.
Never know the whole story. And sometimes being sensitive to that and I know I've made this statement already while we've been talking, understanding that and looking at that guy going, I wonder if he got a diagnosis from the doctor that I don't know about.
That day before that was taken.
Yeah. Wonder if what happened there. Or I wonder if Dee is not feeling real good.
Might have a stomach ache.
Exactly. Yeah. You just don't know. And
wife just got mad at me.
Oh, well, that, you can be in the doghouse. I've got one out by the pool house. I hadn't had to sleep in it yet, but you just don't know. You don't know. And I think that's one thing. We got a lot of people in this community that actually really care about people. And it's a great town, great community. I think your podcast here, your thing is great because you get to talk to a lot of different people and bring a lot of this out.
And a lot of things, a lot of the different episodes will take on a different spirit because of the different moods that each other's in. We could come back here the next week and do this again, and it may even be a totally different conversation.
That's exactly right.
Because it's not scripted. It's just the mood we're in today.
As we're talking. And I think I watched one. Did you have Richie Hughes on here?
Yeah.
Yeah, Richie, he's definitely an interesting
guy. He's one of those Jeff Lovingood, David Goodwill's categories.
But there's another family that's been in the community for a long time that's done a lot of great things. But I think if you're not learning, you're not advancing, you're not moving forward. I don't want to be stagnant.
I don't think we can do that, and I don't think that's healthy.
No,
and I don't think that's what God has in mind, because it talks about the talents. The one that went out and tried to make something of his talents. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? I mean, we're not supposed to just say, "Hey, I've made it. I'm gonna sit on the couch."
No, you can't. You can't do that. And had a lot of conversations with a lot of different people about retiring. Since I hit my mid-50s, I'm 55.
Yeah.
I'll be 56 in April. Good friend of mine in Murfreesboro retired last year. Guy, he retired at 59 and a half. Good friend, good customer for a long time. I said, Bob, his name's Bob. Your dad's Bob. This guy's name's Bob Henry. I said, Bob, you've got a lot left, man. You've got a lot of wisdom to impart. Are you sure you're ready? And he said, I've asked myself these three questions. He said, have I had enough? That was the first question. Professionally, have I had enough? Do I have enough money? Obviously, you can't. You got to have some money.
You don't know how much that is.
Yeah. Have I had enough? Do I have enough? And then, do I have enough things to keep me busy? Those are three questions that he asked himself, and I thought those were pretty good. And he said, one other thing. He said, I had a friend of mine that retired too early. And he said, it's like water skiing. If you slow down, you go down.
Boy, yeah.
It don't matter. If you're water skiing and that boat slows down, you're going down.
You know Glenn Ramsey, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
He's a good friend of mine. I asked him one time, I said, Glenn, when do I need to retire? And he said, you'll know.
2 words.
He said, you'll know.
2 words.
Yeah. It's, in other words, if you have to ask, you're not ready.
How many different takeaways did you get from those 2 words?
It was huge. He said, you'll know.
You'll know.
In other words, you won't wonder. It's not ambiguous.
You'll know when it's time. Yeah. I'd wish I had a crystal ball, and you probably do too, that seeing what that next chapter is. I want to give back. I want to be productive, whether it's financially, whether it's, like we talked about, having a conversation with somebody that needs to have a conversation, whether it's giving back to the community, serving. I went down to the Salvation Army. You remember when it got so cold at Christmas?
Yeah.
It was what, 3 degrees?
3 degrees, yeah.
3 or 4 degrees.
Yeah.
A friend of mine called me up, guy that's retired from Whirlpool. He said, you like to cook, don't you? And I said, yeah, I love to cook. Actually, I really do. Love to grill, love to cook. He said, would you be willing to go and cook breakfast for the homeless people down here at the Salvation Army, right by what used to be Larry's Car Wash, you know?
Yeah.
When it gets below 32 degrees, they open that place up, and all the homeless can go in there and sleep, and they provide a breakfast for them. So I said, you know what? I believe I'll do that. He said, can you do it Saturday? And I thought, yeah, it's Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will. I'll do it. So I met him down there at 6 o'clock, and he says, will you cook the bacon and the sausage? And I said, I absolutely will. Big old skillets, you know, and it's 4 degrees and it's cold. And I could hear all these people in the next room. Some of them were stirring, but they were sawing logs. And I sat right there in that line once we got all the food ready. We cooked them scrambled eggs and biscuits and sausage, link sausage, by the way, and bacon and some fruit, coffee, orange juice. And I made them a plate, you know, just a paper plate. And I thought I had these, all kind of thoughts going through my head, of course, doing something like that. And I thought, in the next chapter, this is the kind of stuff I want to do.
You were sold.
I was sold. I was moved by it. I can't fix all those people. You can't fix them. But if they see me standing there giving them breakfast, some of them might never be thankful. They may think this is just what I'm owed. But some of them might. But that's the kind of thing I want to do in my next chapter, right? Little things like that, to be able to give back to the community. I got more out of that in that hour and 15. I think I was there an hour and 15 or 20 minutes.
Had you done that sort of thing before?
Not that kind of thing. I've served before.
Isn't that ironic that he asked you to do that?
Yeah, it is. I went on a hurricane disaster relief trip one time to Florida and cut up trees, and
that's a little different. This. Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing. Look, I don't know. I don't know that I'm turned to do that every day, right? I mean, I've got some things I want to do, take some trips like we've talked about. I want to hike the Appalachian Trail if I stay healthy enough.
I'd like to do that too. I'd really like to do that.
But I'd really like to have part of my lifestyle to be given back from time to time when an opportunity arises, doing stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the opportunities, if they arrive right now, we don't have time because we got to work. I mean, tomorrow morning at 9:30, you're going to be selling screws to somebody. Oh, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be on a conference call tomorrow morning with my team.
Yeah,
and we're going to be talking about our whip. Right? Yeah, I'll be on that phone for an hour and a half.
And that's the only thing it's going. And by the time 11 o'clock rolls around, you're back in that mode till Friday afternoon.
More than likely. Well, I got to go to Charleston, South Carolina Tuesday. Got to get in the car. But there'll be a day when somebody else is dealing with that.
When, as Glenn Ramsey says, when we know.
When we know. You'll know. I love that.
It's too simple. I was looking for a magical number, a time zone, a thing, and he just said, you'll know. I think I asked him twice, and he said again, you'll know, a little louder than the first time.
With an exclamation point behind it?
You'll know.
Maybe you should print some business cards that just say you'll know on them and hand them out to people. But, that next chapter is, that's my heart's desire, is to be able to have that margin, life margin, that work, that balance, that work-life balance that's so important to human beings.
Maybe we don't look at it as a chapter. It's just the rest, how the story has progressed.
Mm-hmm. The Paul Harvey thing, the rest of the story. Yeah,
how it's progressed. Not necessarily, okay, I'm finished, now I'm starting. Because if we stop thinking about it as a stopping and a starting point, maybe it'll be easier for us to migrate, because if we
Yeah.
think of it as stopping, we're almost thinking of Lay's Five and Dime closing up.
Yeah.
So let's think about it in terms of, it's just we've eased into it like an old man into hot water.
Mm-hmm. Like boiling a frog, right?
That's right. Just
You start out
ease into
cold,
it.
because the
Yeah.
frog will never jump out
Yeah.
if you put him in hot.
Rather
jump
than
out,
stop, because me and you may have a hard time with stopping and starting. Because if
Yeah.
we stop in our minds,
Yeah. You got a big motor like me.
Yeah.
I got a big motor. I've got to be doing something.
maybe it just evolves.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. In an evolution, that is, and some of these things you got a plan, right? You in your mind, you got the thing that you think you want to do, and you think how it's all going to pan out. It usually never works that way. Sometimes it's way better than you think. Sometimes it's not. I mean, look, I could wake up tomorrow. Matter of fact, let's see, what's tomorrow, Monday? Tuesday, I'm going to my doctor and getting a physical. 2:00.
Boy, I went through that period
I'm going to get
where
a
I
physical.
would go get a physical and everything.
Yeah.
And you get to where they're just going to worry you to death.
Well, I'm going to
Unless
get
something's
one.
wrong with you, just forget it.
Well, I didn't get one last year, so I'm going.
But there ain't nothing wrong with you, right?
I don't think so.
Well, then why check it?
Well, if I found out that there was, then I might have a different perspective on that evolution that you're talking about. Maybe it needs to happen sooner. Maybe I just need to keep on
They
grinding.
say everybody has 2.8 abnormalities. And if you go get regular physicals, they'll find them and they'll worry you to death.
2.8? Where do they come up with that?
That's the national statistics.
Okay.
2.8, it's divided up by the abnormalities, I guess.
Yeah.
2.8 abnormal things that are outside the norm. That's just what your body is. There's nothing wrong.
I was told one of them is the fact that I'm my dad's son is an abnormality. I got tickled when it said that. Of course, that was just jokingly, but
I would look at that as
You
not
never
a
heard that, have
defect, but a what do they call that?
An asset?
It's another, or not a defect, but a feature.
A feature. Good point. That's a feature.
It's a feature.
Well, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. We know that, right? It really doesn't.
No, it don't.
It
It's
doesn't.
funny how we train all our lives to be like somebody else, and we end up just like them.
Yeah, I hear that more and more, which is a little bit scary. But I think a lot of it is training your mind to capture your thoughts and to take every thought captive and think about what it is that you're how you do things and what you think about. I think that's I think people like John Wayne and people, some of the greatest people in the history of mankind, probably figured out how to do that a little bit better than the rest of everybody else. Ben Franklin.
Well, he did a lot in a short time, didn't he? How old was he when he died?
I'm not real sure, but I was listening to.
Every time I read something, Ben Franklin's the one that did it.
He's just known for the electricity, right?
No, he's
But
known for
he's got so many different things.
That was the least of his stuff.
Yeah, he had so many different things. But a guy like that probably was always. He just looked at things a little bit different than just the average Joe, if you will. And trying to do that is something that I want to try to do as a human being. It's hard, but I want to try to. I really do. I think you're just going to be in the win column when you do that.
All I can say is we've done good. Let's keep doing good, and let's get excited about the next 32 years.
Absolutely. Thank you, buddy. I've loved it.